we'll leave that for now. Our topic today is Tarot and the Hero's Journey, and our guest is Catharine or Catharine Allan, whichever you prefer. She has a graduate degree. Can you hear me? Is that what you're asking?
No, she says she can't see. It's.
Oh no, don't worry about it. It hasn't started.
The slideshow hasn't started.
Don't look at it yet. Don't look at it yet. It's good.
You're going to interrupt me.
She has a graduate degree in community economic development from Concordia University, Bachelor of Arts in Literature, Art History, and Education from Queen's University, Business and Coaching and Women's Business Training from multiple schools, and she is facilitating experience for incest rape support groups. She has a certificate in personality disorders from the Douglas Hospital. And the really interesting part, of course, is her artistic bio. She designs and sews costume for theater, film, and Cirque du Soleil, beautiful costumes. And she's a professional. You're still a professional wedding singer?
No,
not anymore.
I still
in
sing,
past,
but not professional. Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about the Hero's Journey, articulated by Joseph Campbell's work, which describes the patterns we see in almost every Disney movie or epic novel that talks about a process of our development and enlightenment, our ability to overcome adversity and rely on ourselves first, discernment of others, and connection to the divine. Tarot also describes a cycle or model for human evolution, and this afternoon we'll explore these parallels and lessons with Catharine. Would you welcome her today, please?
Thank you. Hi there. So I'd like to just have a show of hands. How many people actually have any experience with tarot in the room? Yeah?
Well, I...
Yeah? Okay, so you've seen the cards. Did you know them well, or like just a little bit, dabbling? You know them well? Okay. And how many people have heard of or read anything about the Hero's Journey or Joseph Campbell? So you know a bit more. Okay. Alrighty, just trying to gauge where to go. If I'm wave me down if I'm like going too fast or too slow. There's a lot of info to pack in here, because if you have taken a look before at the tarot, and anything archetypal is pretty fascinating and pretty complex, right? So. I'm never good at introducing myself. I mean, you introduced me, but I feel like I should say I have an office downtown, and I have a way of seeing people out here in the West Island for consultations. I give tarot readings, clairvoyance, mediumship, and astrology, and I teach classes. And I also now have an internet radio show that's Mondays at 8 p.m. and I play music, and I talk about different themes. Sometimes it's astrology, sometimes it's the full moon, sometimes last night I did a show just on belonging, because the times that we're in, it's very relevant to emphasize the ways we belong. So if you're interested in tuning into any of that, you can pick up my card here, find my website, and then everything is on there. And I have a newsletter if you're interested to sign up as well. So, The Hero with 1,000 Faces is the work of Joseph Campbell, first published in 1949. It's a work of comparative mythology by American mythologist Joseph Campbell. He discusses a theory of the journey of the archetypal hero found in all mythologies. Since the publication of The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Campbell's theory has been consciously applied by a wide variety of modern writers and artists. Probably the best known would be George Lucas and his film Star Wars. So if you think Star Wars is, or Disney, a lot of Disney things would be a great analogy, because you have, usually in a fairy tale or even in Star Wars, you have a young person who's quite naive maybe, but they get this call that they've got a quest, or they have some sort of calling or mission, or they know there's something beyond the borders of where they grew up. And they sort of, in fairy tales, maybe they go through a forest, or they go through a tunnel, or they go through, something to symbolize that they're entering from one world to another. In Star Wars, how many people are familiar with Star Wars before I start talking about Okay, so we're not, yeah, it's a generational thing with Star Wars, you know. I grew up where I was 8 years old when they came out, so for me it's just my whole adulthood has been Star Wars. But you have the young hero Luke Skywalker, right, with his lightsaber, and he hears the call, and he ends up getting a message through a robot from Princess Leia that says he has to find her. And then he's compelled to go and embark on this mission. And then there's always a part of us that resists, like, oh no, I can't do that. I don't want to go. So there's all these stages where we end up confronting our fears, where you realize there's something more to life than just the tangible. There's also the supernatural. And so the tarot is just also very interesting. It doesn't follow quite the same maybe prescription that the hero's journey does. We're gonna look at the stages Joseph Campbell says are the hero's journey, and then I'm going to correlate them to certain tarot cards. But the tarot has its own order and its own sort of way of describing human development. And the hero's journey has a different one, but they do overlap and correlate. So I've picked about 10 different cards and how they're going to correlate to this journey. So, and you can stop me at any time, you know, if something feels just like, slow down, Catherine, or that doesn't make sense, then please let me know. But I'll just read this little intro before we get into the cards. So Campbell explores the theory that important myths from around the world, which has survived for thousands of years, all share a fundamental structure, which he calls the monomyth. In a well-known quote from the introduction to The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he summarizes it as this: "A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man, or gifts." In laying out the monomyth, Campbell describes a number of the stages or steps along this journey. The hero starts in the ordinary world and receives a call to enter an unusual world of strange powers and events, a call to adventure. If the hero accepts the call to enter this strange world, the hero must face tasks and trials, and may have to face these trials alone or may have assistance. We see that all the time in Disney and books too, right? The young hero or heroine is alone, and then suddenly maybe an animal shows up to be their friend, or something mystical shows up to guide them or give them a message along the way. At its most intense, the hero must survive a severe challenge, often with the help earned along the journey. And if the hero survives, they may achieve a great gift, a goal, or a boon, which he calls, which often results in the discovery of important self-knowledge. And the hero must then decide whether to return with this boon, the return to the ordinary world, often facing challenges on the return journey as well. If the hero is successful in returning, these gifts may be used to improve the world. So, can anybody relate to this in any way? Are you thinking of any stories that have touched you that fit this? Yeah?
My life is like that.
Your life, okay, good. Yes.
But I would like to ask you, maybe you will come back to it. You said something about archetypal, and are you going to discuss it?
Yes,
Okay.
through the tarot.
Okay.
The archetypes through the tarot. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, how many of us can think of a hero? A hero is an archetype that runs through centuries, through millennia. Every culture has a version of the hero. You know, you mentioned to me at the beginning that you're Greek. So, you know, the pantheon of Greek gods and heroes, you know, that we've all grown up with in our culture, and we just maybe take for granted. But then we have Superman, you know, that's another modern hero. Sometimes, it's people in real life who have made significant progress in science, or who have paved the way for new laws to protect us, but we're all, in a sense, the hero of our own lives. It's just that sometimes those things are more mundane, like we're not all jumping off buildings and flying, we're not all saving the world, but we all fit somehow in one or more archetypes. The hero is the one we're talking about, but really the archetype of it could be of mother. How many of you are mothers? Mother is an archetype because we expect, we have all these attributes we expect that mean mother, and they change, right, with different cultures too. But it's still like an archetypal thing. No matter where you go in the world, you learn the word mother and people will go, oh, and they'll relate to it back through the centuries. They'll have an association. Same with the father. Obviously, none of you are fathers in here. A child is still an archetype as well. And we probably know lots of people who are still in their child side and never grow up, right? Think of people that are always walking through the world. No, it'll be fine, and they don't, they stay sort of naive, or they don't assume their responsibilities. Certainly they don't get to the hero stage. And then there's other archetypes that are more difficult for us to navigate if we have those in our lives. Let's say, I'll just take a couple of them, but let's say your overall archetype in this life is a teacher. So think about the things that you associate with teachers. You expect them to be good speakers, expect them to be organized, expect them to have education, you expect them to exercise a little bit of discipline, you expect them to have patience and answer questions and be available, right? But what if my archetype in this life is a slave? What if my overall feeling is a slave? Well, it's completely different now. Now I'm disempowered. I feel I can't escape something. I either need to fight back, be sneaky, or be rescued. Think about how much that would change your life if the main feeling you have or that you carry is the slave versus the teacher, or a mother versus a child. It starts to impact all of the way you think, all the way you believe the world works, and all the way that you act and interact with others. Let's just take, for example, just because we're there, with let's say with relationships, let's say your archetype is the mother. What are you going to do when you meet somebody? You're going to mother them. So that comes with good and bad, right? If you're dating and you're the mother of the guy you're dating, it doesn't feel so good, does it? You don't get to have that passion the same way because, oh, well, I have to do things for him. He can't think for himself.
If he can visit him, he might be the type that will fit there.
Oh, a lot of men enjoy being mothered, yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for us. And if your archetype is the slave and you meet somebody, and you meet that same man, but you act like a slave, you might do the same actions the mother would do, but in a different way. Now you feel like you have to. You have no choice. So as we go through some of these cards and some of these archetypes, just see if it reminds you of yourself or if it reminds you of anyone you know. Yeah?
When you say that, is it like the victim?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, a victim spends a lot of time, though, feeling sorry for themselves, right? Or being in situations where they are victimized over and over. I think a slave's even tougher than that one. But yeah, similar. And there's multiple, an artist is an archetype too. A more fun one. So is a lunatic, right? A fool. There's going to be a version of what that is, the crazy person. It's another archetype too. And, you know, there's good, bad, and ugly of all of these. I just want to have a look then at the hero's journey stages here. And I'll blow it up so we can see it as well as we can. Can you see that enough?
It's not clear at all. And I have my glasses.
You got sunglasses, no?
No, it's really glasses, like the vision glasses.
Well, I don't know what to tell you because I can't blow it up any more than this. I don't really know how to use this.
No, I find it too, it's not quite clear, but if I concentrate, I can get it.
Yeah, I'll be reading it, so yeah. So, the first part is the ordinary world. So, of course, that's just like mundane, you know, think about ordinary life. You walk out of your house in the morning, you get in your car, you go to work, you get on the bus. It's the ordinary world. You make your lunch. The next part is the call to adventure. That's where maybe you feel compelled to go do something beyond what is considered normal for your circumstances, your family life, where you feel drawn somewhere. The call to adventure could be anything. And it could come when you're a child or it could come when you're an adult. So, I'm trying to think of a good example because it's all this Star Wars again. But, be a good one. Well, think about a simple one like a Disney movie, like Finding Nemo or something. You know this film? The little fish? So, you know, the son is lost, the little fish is lost. But he feels, you know, like he ends up exploring and going beyond his normal circumstances or his ordinary world, and he's thrust into the full-on ocean. And then he meets all these different characters, and he meets the other fish, Dory or whatever, who helps try to navigate him and find his way back, right? And he goes through like threats to, you know, life and death, and then he finds his father again, and they have to make peace. You know, this is the hero's journey too. But if you think about our own lives, think about something where your own call to adventure could have been that you felt you had to learn an instrument, even though no one in your family is a musician. Or maybe you felt like you had to go explore a different part of town than, and you know, it's something that goes beyond what your current circumstances says is either okay, normal, or it's still a call to adventure. You know, if I'm compelled for whatever reason to you know, I moved out of the province, I felt compelled to come to Montreal. I'm from Southern Ontario. So for me, that was huge because nobody ever came up here. We didn't have any exposure to French culture or anything else than Anglo culture, really, from where I'm from. So that was a call to adventure. I crossed the bridge here on a trip, and I was like, oh my God, I have to come back to Montreal one day. And then I did, you know, and the adventure began. Then there's the refusal of the call. So that would be something like, think of something in your life now where you're like, oh, I'd really love to do that. I'd really love to do that. And you feel like you can't get it off your mind. That's a call to action. And then there's another says, oh, it's too hard. It's too hard. I don't have the money. No, it won't work. If I do that, I'm going to lose friends, or I'm going to lose support that I rely on. I'm going to lose security. I can't follow my call to adventure. There's always that refusal or that fear to go ahead. You can relate to this? Yeah. And then we meet the mentor.
If you don't refuse.
If you don't refuse, yes. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Some people just stay in refusal all their life, and they build a life around security and fear of going forward, right? But if we go forward, yes, then it's said that you will meet the mentor. So you'll meet a teacher, somebody will appear on your path to help you. Like the proverbial, when the student is ready, the teacher appears kind of moments. Has anyone had those moments? Yeah? Yeah. For me, it happened with the tarot and all that stuff. It was a guy I was dating. I had no idea what tarot cards were. He just pulled them out one day and I was fascinated. And for him, it was just whatever. It's sort of interesting. It's a game. And for me, I never put them down again. So it's an indirect mentor, right? But then there's mentors that show up, teachers that show up that are more active in your growth, you know. They actually show you, they explain, they get to know you, they get to know your life. But people can still be mentors or teachers even if they're not actively doing so, right? But they still bring us to a new point. Then, number 5 here, we cross the threshold into the special world. That's where you start to touch upon the fact that there's more to life than you ever thought. There's different dimensions or realities than you ever imagined. There's different people, there's different ways of thinking. There's, you know, it could be something that feels exotic or it could be something that feels supernatural. You know, if I use my own example of moving here, I knew I would go through a culture shock, but I had no clue what I was really in for, right? Because you can't until you get there. So crossing this threshold of like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden there's like so many cultures I've never experienced before. Suddenly there's so many languages that I've never heard before. Suddenly things just function differently. Things are built differently. Things look different. I grew up in the country and suddenly in escalators and concrete, you know. Suddenly I have to learn a new language and there's all this pressure and politics with it that I never grew up with. So there's like, it might not feel that special at the time. It can be a pressure too, but you're crossing the threshold into something that is beyond the little bubble of what you grew up with and what's familiar, and you bust that open, and that special world could just be anything that expands your horizons, or of course in these stories, a lot of the time it's something supernatural or something, you know, spiritual even. So you start to awaken and you start to shift and change. And then, of course, you run into tests, allies, and enemies. That's when, you know, the little friends show up in the forest there. Or if it's spiritual, maybe it's the first time you feel like there's an angel around you, or you start dreaming of your grandma who gives you, you know, guidance in your dreams. Or if it's, you know, in a mundane sense, I can think of people that showed up who just magically helped me or taught me that I didn't really go looking for, but because I took a risk, they appeared. And of course, the trials and the tests and the allies and the enemies can be a very long stretch of life, right? Very long stretch before we have the more confidence. The approach, that's not clear to me. I'm going to take a look at a different diagram because I brought more than one. Yeah. This one's a little better. Okay, there we go. I need my glasses. All right. Yes. The approach of the cave, the innermost cave. So that would be a stage where you have to find protection and go within, and you're looking for some sense of understanding what's going on, some rest from whatever these tests are, and you're looking to go more within. I think we'll go through the rest of it with the actual tarot cards, or I'm never going to get this done. So here we go. So the first card here. The first card would be the Fool. How many of you have seen these before? No? So the one on the right is from the Rider-Waite deck. This is the classic deck most people learn on. And the other one is from a deck called the Cosmic. And I like to do comparative with the cards because each card represents the same kind of archetype, but the artist portrays it in a slightly different way. So we see the Fool here. The Fool would be the hero. It's that naive, innocent, I'm on my way, you know, somewhere like to an adventure. They sense that something is grand could happen, but they might have the experience, but they might also fall off the cliff. As you see, the foot is very close to the cliff. We don't know whether they're going to perch there or whether they're going to take the next step and fall, because they're looking up in the air instead of at their feet, right? Then if you notice, there's a dog beside each one. And the dog seems to be there like an ally saying, hey, watch it, be careful. But if you look at the expression in the different fools here, this one is very much like, la, 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 you know, and it looks like he's going to walk off the cliff. This one is sort of balanced, but his hands look like he's balancing himself, and he's facing forward. And this sort of shows a different side of the Fool, because the Fool can also be the person who has gone through the entire cycle, and now they are more like the visionary. Now they understand something about life, and they can come back, and it's sort of like they have a mystical ability because they have gone through these cycles. So the Fool is like the dreamer and the realizer, the visionary. But we have to see, you know, when it comes to the hero's journey, and we think about, well, where is the person starting? Where is that hero starting off? They could be starting off very naive, and we could worry for them, or they could be starting off, if it's us, and we start a journey in adulthood, it's with a lot more knowledge. So the next step here that I'll relate to a card would be the meeting of the mentor or the teacher. And the teacher card is the Hierophant. So once again, you have the Rider-Waite deck here, and then this one is from a deck called the Thoth deck, and they have very different philosophies. The Hierophant is in other decks called the Pope, because you know, from centuries ago, the Hierophant here is the person who is supposed to be the conduit or the messenger from the divine. So they could be a priest, they could be a pope, they could be a teacher. In our modern day, it could be a life coach, it could be a yoga teacher, it could be a guru, but it's somebody who is supposed to have sort of, it implies they have access to the divine side of life, and they have wisdom, and they can, and then they're there to guide you. Yeah, go ahead.
The word Hierophant is a Greek word. The first part, hiero, means saint.
Saint, okay.
And phant is the adjective. Like, hiero is, there are two Greeks here. Hiero, phant is saint.
Okay.
It's a Greek.
A saint, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. And as you see on this one, it's more the traditional relationship that we're thinking of, you know, where it looks like it's somebody who's sort of above and has their followers below, and they've got all their robes. But in this one, you see a whole other side going on. You see that there's a child figure here in the heart. So there's like an inner wise child going on. You also see here there's a goddess figure below. And then you see all this light around his head. And there's actually a snake running around that. So this Hierophant is showing that he has enlightenment. But he's in touch with the child side of him and the feminine side of him. Whereas this one seems to imply more like a traditional male kind of, you know, disciples and, you know, like a power between them. And this one you see these animals all around him, which could be, you know, they could be the demons he's fighting off. They could be anything that's come to give him a message, but he is protected. So the meeting of the teacher or the mentor. So, you know, I juxtapose the cards too because, you know, the quality of our journey and whether we succeed at our calling can really depend on the quality of our teachers and guides, right? Yeah. The next step of the journey here would be the trials and tests and tribulations. And that card usually would be represented by the Chariot. So this time, this one is from the Cosmic deck. This is from the Thoth deck. I don't know if any of you can read this, but the Tree of Life in the Hebrew is on all of the Thoth deck, as well as astrology. So this card says it's the symbol for Cancer. And the Chariot is the part where, sort of like the guy with the 2 horses running, he now has to overcome these obstacles. You see the rocks and the twigs on his path. You know, they could crush them and run by, or they could trip. We don't know. And he's got 2, one's black, one is white, and he's got to consolidate these horses and overcome different directions and different wills and different people's motivations and try to get everybody on board so that this chariot can roll forward. Whereas the other one, it's more stationary, and he's got all this armor and protection, right? But he's carrying this enormous disc as if he's got this enormous potential power from his will. This is the solar plexus, or the center of your power, personal power or will. So it's giving different philosophies of how to overcome the trials and tribulations part. One is like, oh my God, these horses are control, right? And the other one is armored and protected, and it's like, my will overcome this. You see, I don't know if I hope I'm being clear, but one is much more inner focused, and one is more like, oh my God, circumstantial. So it just gives a different philosophy, you know, on how these trials and tribulations can happen in the journey. The next part would be the going within the cave, the approach, and the going within. Approaching the innermost cave would definitely be the Hermit card. And again, we have the Cosmic deck and the Thoth deck. And to me, they're both beautiful. But the Hermit is, it's seeking solitude. It's usually renouncing possessions, renouncing the material life to find enlightenment, to go within. Could be solitude, could be somebody who's, you know, a monk, a priest, a nun, could be a hermit in our modern day. Could be somebody that does a lot of meditation. Could be somebody who wants to live out in nature on their own. It's a period of solitude that we all need to go within. If anybody in here considers himself sort of an introvert, you can also fit the Hermit. You need your quiet. You like your time alone. You know, you don't want too much loud music or partying going on. And we see that, you know, there's this beautiful blue color that he's surrounded by, and we see this star and the light and the lantern. And it shows that even though he looks like he's, you know, very inner focused, almost asleep or meditating, there's a stillness, but he's reaching some sort of light, insight, knowledge from stillness. And the other one too, it sort of shows, you know, his hand is holding the sun here. He's got the 3-headed dog. I think it's Cerberus. Do you remember? Your Greek thought. I'm asking her. The 3-headed dog, is it Cerberus?
Are you talking to me?
No, the lady behind you.
I can't remember now.
Can't remember, yeah. Anyway, I think it is. And then you see you know, he's sort of bent over here with his hair, and the light is on him. So even though what he's looking at directly seems dark or thick, it's actually wheat that's surrounding him, which is a fertility symbol, an abundance. But we know that there's light shining all around him, and we see that pretty soon there's a break in that thickness or darkness. And then there's an egg here surrounded again by a snake, which would definitely talk about like a rebirth that can happen from facing whatever this darkness is. And if you can think of, you know, this is very relevant all the time in life, but, you know, we can think about just what's going on right now. You know, we might feel overwhelmed or consumed by what's changing in the world so fast. Things can feel dark, but they might not be. You know, we might be approaching a time, if we look within, where there could be a lot of new ideas and a lot of light, or a rebirth, even if it's a bit shocking. And that's what the innermost cave is about. We all need a retreat from those trials and tribulations after a while, to calm ourselves, because there's a certain level of knowledge or awareness we just can't get to by always thinking, or trying too hard. Sometimes you have to sit and be still and receive. Does anybody here meditate? Yeah? Oh, awesome. So you know, if you meditate long enough, in that stillness, suddenly, boing, you get that light bulb moment where you might understand something that you couldn't have before if you weren't sitting there. The next card would be the meeting of the shadow self, which of course also happens if we're meditating enough, where we go within ourselves. We start to see the not so nice side of ourselves or the not so nice side of others. And that I correlate with the card of the devil. You know, a lot of people fear the devil, but to me in the tarot, the devil represents let's say the lower side of our nature, the side where there can be lust, control, manipulation, addiction, stuff like that. You know, the side of us that can get greedy, or you know, allowing the dynamics to get sort of heavy. It's sort of, you know, we're nervous of the devil like overpowering us or controlling our will, but if you look at it from your own personal growth, it can be just looking at the ways that you do that in your own life, or allow it to happen to us. And everybody goes through some sort of shadow awareness in your life, where you have to take a look at, okay, what am I thinking that's not working for me, that's maybe negative? What am I doing that's perpetuating patterns that are not really helping me or anybody else? What am I, we all have addictions to something, right? And if it's Facebook or work or something, everybody's got something. And we have to, you know, we have to dig into why we're doing that at some point. So the shadow self is essential for our growth, so that we understand it, and we can accept ourselves having it, and we can start to work on releasing it. Otherwise, many people, right, we get stuck in the shadow self and stay there too. That's what takes most people down. Once they get to that part, they either can't forgive themselves, or if it's certain paths, harder to get out of. Let's say if it is the addiction one, it's very hard to get out of. And you can see also with the two different cards, we have the figure of a goat, which is usually associated, and these horns, right? And we have an inverted pentagram up top there, which is usually a symbol of black magic, which is using your will or your power over others versus your own power. And we see that these people are sort of enslaved or chained Same thing here, they're just sort of locked into something else. But the point is, on the hero's journey, we will encounter our shadow self, and we have to find a way to heal it or to bring it to light so that we can continue to the better stages of what it can bring us to. It gives us enormous power to know and accept what our shadow side is. The next stage on the hero's journey is an ordeal, right? This is the part where, this is the scary part of the movie, you know, or the scary part of the story where there's some sort of level of destruction or some sort of threat to the person's existence or to their community or something like that. This is one of the nastiest cards in the deck, but I bring them up because, you know, to me, when you study the entire tarot and you study the hero's journey, we have to look at all these stages as just normal cycles of what happens in a person's life or in history. And they keep going round and round and round. And not be afraid that they're there, but understand what they're about so that we know how to get out of them and we can find the positive in them. So the tower looks like hell, right? It looks terrible. There's people, you know, there's a lightning bolt from God hitting the tower, sending people out of the tower. And this one too, you can see this mouth here, breathing fire. And you see also the Eye of Horus at the top and some other animals there. The tower, my best example of the tower is this. The tower is when you've had a warning. Okay, we've told you twice. Okay, you're still not moving on, eh? You're still not learning? Okay, now we're going to make life a little harder for you. Oh, you're still not budging, eh? And then bam! Now life is forcing you. So it's not pleasant. But at the same time, it needs to happen to liberate you from that stuckness. So for me, my concrete example of the tower moment was living in a place in NDG. I love this place because it was huge and it was central, but it had some issues. It had some very sketchy neighbors, and I couldn't let go of the place. I was still enamored with what I wanted it to be versus what was really going on, you know. And I kept not listening to the urges that it was maybe time to move and let go. So one day I was sitting in my living room and my cat ran and the ceiling fell, like about 4 by 6 foot of plaster. And I was, of course, totally upset. I called a friend. She dashed over. She called the fire department, the building inspectors, the cops, the whole 9 yards. Everybody was there. And then she found out information about the landlords, and we figured out that these people were also pretty corrupt. And it was time for me to move, right? Like, what clearer sign can I get than this? And so I was able then to understand the situation I was in and take a very quick decision. Within a couple of months, I found a great place and I got out of there, pretty much scot-free. But that's how the tower will work. It's something, you know, the devil precedes the tower. You get stuck in this sort of rut with the devil, and it can only go so far before it just can't work anymore. The lightning bolt will hit. So hopefully we don't have too many of these moments in life, but I'm sure everybody can think of at least one where something hit you, but it turned out to liberate you in the end. Yeah? I mean, sometimes even illness can do that. It doesn't seem like it, but it can. You know, sometimes we have to get sick to get better. It can eradicate other things. Sometimes, you know, there's all kinds of ways of looking at it positively, in my opinion. But like I said, it won't be pleasant to live. But if you can find a way to see that you're actually clearing out and liberating yourself from something old that hasn't been working, you can really start to rebuild from the tower moment. the ordeal. The next one is much nicer. The next one, we start to cross the next threshold. And let me just double check what it says about that one. I'm making sure. Yeah, there's new rules. There's some sort of reversal, and there's sort of new paradigm that you're operating by. So crossing the next threshold, the star card comes after the tower. Look how nice that is after that, right? We see a beautiful goddess. We see that she's sort of, you know, in front of the world. She's not in it. She's a little bit beyond it now. She's opening her hand up, that there's another dimension, and there's another dimension below as well. So this threshold, there's the return of hope. There's a return of idealism. There's an idea, there's a sense of wonder and what is possible. And that things are also a little more, maybe on a cosmic level. This is the classic Rider-Waite version. And you still see all these stars above her. She feels safe to be, you know, naked in this river. She's returned to some sort of innocence. And she's got one foot in the water and one foot on the ground. So there's sort of this sense that you understand two worlds now. You're walking in two worlds. You're able to handle being in two different paradigms, two different realities. And I think a lot of us live like that all the time now. Because, again, to take a current example, I'll have people tell me, you know, I feel really optimistic about my life. Maybe not the US or the world, but my own life, I feel pretty good right now. That's a dual paradigm. To have, you know, one sense of the world through what we hear through the news versus another sense of what we feel in our own gut or what's going on in our lives. And there's multiple paradigms. So this is sort of the next threshold. Is this expansion of understanding different dimensions in the world. Okay, the next one would be, I'll go back to this. Should be the moon. There we go. The next one they call Refusal to Return, or the realm of the wild woman or the wild man. This one's a little harder to describe. And the moon card also can be a bit murky. You know, a refusal to return. They mean sort of a refusal to return back to ordinary reality or the ordinary world. Because as we said, if at the beginning, the hero goes into the supernatural, goes through all these tests, comes back with the ability to give gifts back, but must return to the ordinary world and share it with the people from where he came from or she came from. So there's a part of us that once we've touched this amazing, you know, the star qualities there, we don't want to come back. We might want to stay there. Why should I give back? Why should I come back? I'm enjoying things here. So the moon card can sort of represent that, because the moon, it's a funny card. As you see, you've got two towers and two gatekeepers, or two animals there. In this one especially, you see, it's very hard to tell the difference between one or the other. There's something mysterious and foggy about the moon. There's something hidden with the moon. And it's a full moon as well, which we all think of, you know, as barking at the moon, howling at the moon. It can make people, you know, heightened in their emotions, or it can, in old days you'd say it'd make people lunatics, right? Lunatic. And we have also here this scorpion crawling out of the water, or here it's a scarab below the water, which also, you know, shows Scorpio. It's about showing the secret depths of what's going on way under the surface. But they're so busy barking at the moon. So we can get caught in the moon card phase, or that refusal to return. So I say this stage of the hero's journey, I think, is harder to pinpoint or relate to. But trying to think of a concrete example. Yeah, go ahead.
Could it just be like, you know, like sometimes you learn a lot, and at a certain point you have to give back and teach somebody else. Sometimes not really necessarily to teach it. You're sort of resisting that moment where you have to also become someone who can actually guide somebody else, and you have to take in that you have more than you think hidden there. You know, again, more than you know.
Yeah.
That you think you would be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And show. Like I know that for me, that phase of I have to teach now because I know so much. I have to give back. There's a one where we're like, I don't really want to, but.
Yeah, there's something about maybe we're not ready for the responsibility of it yet, or maybe we want to stay in our own process, our own head longer. Is that what she's saying too? Yeah?
Sort of all in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the moon card can also sort of represent sort of this drunken hysteria kind of state as well. And it can be fun, but it can also not be so good. So let's say, I'm trying to think of an example of these stories. Okay, well, I've noticed a lot, you know, in the field that I'm in, anybody studying anything with energy work or esoteric stuff or spiritual stuff, we definitely touch and cross over into those other worlds, other paradigms, and there's something magical about that. There's a high. And then there's lots of people might sort of get caught up in all kinds of confusing states of mind or take things too far. For example, let's say somebody's studying, I don't know, herbalism, and then they get into how the herbs can do magic, and then maybe they start to take classes, and then they think that they're a priestess or a witch, or they can change the weather, you know, or they think that they can, that would be a moon state, you know, they're just sort of lost in this other realm, and maybe not very realistic or in touch with what, you know, what's the effects are on them or others. So this stage I also think a lot of people won't relate to, because a lot of us just will find this kind of step or energy very uncomfortable, or when it happens to us, we'll be quite unconscious of it. We might need other people to again nudge us along. So let's take a look at the next one. Maybe it'll help. So then we get the dark night of the soul, or the reversal, the death card. And the death card, a lot of people are scared of, but it's really not, the way it plays out in real life isn't actually very often a literal death. It's usually a very quick transformation for the better. Usually the death card, like this one is, you know, the Rider-Waite is more our classic, in a sense, sort of Christian idea of the world, where there's power up here and I'm down there, and death comes riding in and it decides it's your turn. And you see people begging for mercy, he doesn't care, he's just riding through town. This is like a dark way to look at the death card. This one, he still looks a little scary, of course, but look how much more dynamic it is. And he's taking his sickle and he's cutting away all these strings that are binding this figure. And it's free to go, it's free to float in the light. So the death card, the way it plays out in real life, is usually something where, I'll use an easy example. Let's say I've got a trip booked in a few months, and everything's paid for, and I'm so looking forward to it. And the day that it arrives, weather's bad, plane can't take off. I'm going to lose my whole deal, my whole package. Done, no trip. you're just, right? The death card would be like, oh my God, what do? I don't know what to do with myself. I was going to go for a month. Like what? You'll just be sort of stunned, and you'll be sad, and you'll be in shock. But the way the death card plays out in real life is that right after that, you might get a better offer for a better trip to make up the difference for it. So when I see the death card, I know that something is going to happen quickly, but it's going to bring in something better than you expected quickly. And what better way to break us out of that moon, foggy, you know, I'm a guru, I'm a this, oh my God, I'm getting messages right now. This is just, wow, I don't want to leave this state of mind I'm in. And then something comes and says, no, this way. And that's sort of how it'll feel. And they call it the dark night of the soul in the hero's journey. They're going to definitely, in our stories of heroes, they're going to paint that maybe in a little slower way than I'm describing the death card. Can you think of one in a story or a movie, a dark night of the soul moment that you remember from a movie or literature ever? Anybody? There's so many, that's the problem. If we think about, again, the Star Wars example, you know, we could say that the dark night of the soul might be when he's fighting his father and he realizes that the most evil person in the universe, Darth Vader, is his father. It's a pretty dark night of the soul. It's something shocking, it's something just devastating, but it was the turning point. He became a man. He had the truth. Then he knew what to do to defeat him too. So the death card always brings something of the light as well. It's not a bad thing. Then the next stage is the resurrection. For this, I'm going to use the Judgment card. And we look at, again, the Rider-Waite deck shows more the judgment in the Christian sense. Again, angels coming down, please save me, you know, and it's something, again, exterior deciding whether our soul was good enough and whether we're saved based on our actions. In this one, the top there, he calls it the Eon. Here again, I know these images are complex, but so we point out, you can see the figure of a person that's sort of going like this. You can also see here, there's a figure of sort of a god or a shaman or something, a wise masculine. And then here you see babies. And the blue all the way around there is a woman surrounding it. So again, in that deck, it's always showing multiple layers of the self. Instead of up there and I'm down here, it's much more self-centered and integrating all of these sides of ourselves. The young, the wise, the old, the male, the female of ourselves. And this card I love because instead of it being judgment, it's more the resurrection side. It's more, I will take a step and I will take a stand. And I've done all the research I can. I've been through all of this stuff. And now I have enough knowledge to say, this is what I believe. This is who I am. This is what I'm calling it. This is what my truth is. And it's that moment that we stand alone before God, but in a different way than being judged by God. It's, I stand before God. It's very different. And at that moment, and that takes so much work for us all to get there. But if you make it to that moment in your life where you can do that and come out and stand on that, now you have enormous power. Now you're in that position to give back or to come back. And so now we go to another stage, which is the the sacrifice, the next threshold. Now you're going to be asked, with that newfound power, that newfound confidence, you're going to be put in a difficult situation where you have to show that you can sacrifice for others. So the hangman, you see there's two different versions again. This one, he looks like he could probably untie himself at any old time if he wants to. He's just hanging there. He's got all this light around his head. It's not a comfortable position to be hanging there, but he doesn't look that uncomfortable. This one, he's nailed there. He has an ankh, symbolizing eternal life, past, reincarnation. He has a snake binding his foot, but he is nailed there. He has snakes below him, and then maybe a little bit of light around his head. In this one, the sacrifice is going to be much more serious. It's going to be more difficult, or it's going to be more about your karma, if you believe in that. So the way the hangman plays out is it's a slow baby step kind of transformation. It's not like the death card that goes, or the tower that says, wake up, we told you. This one is, an example of this would be, let's say, you find out that someone close to you is ill. They don't have anyone to take care of them. You're the closest person, you're the only one. Suddenly, their life is different, your life's very different. Day by day, there's going to be a lot of painstaking routine kind of stuff, right? Life slows down, it seems like nothing's going on except this act of caretaking. So you're making a sacrifice. At the same time, though, you're getting to know them again. And all the little minute ways that bond us or that build intimacy can come back in the smallest details. And over that course of time, you'll become a different person, and so will they. But it happens very slowly, this card. So this is sort of this stage where you've gone through a lot on your own journey, and you've reached a certain point in yourself, and now you're asked to give back. And it's sometimes not very easy at the beginning, right? If we think about the Star Wars analogy again, it would be something where, they have to prepare for these battles, and they're not easy. They take a lot of strategy and timing, and there's sacrifice of life, and it's not something that happens in a day. And then once your sacrifice is done, you get the world card. You get the mastery of two worlds. Then you're at the point of closure. You've given back. So the world card I love, and again, you see similarities in both. It's a woman, and she's surrounded by, either this cloth or, again, a snake. A lot of snakes in the decks, you've probably noticed. And snakes represent change and wisdom and healing and death and rebirth. And you see the animals, now that they're sort of safely in their corners. When we saw the Hierophant, they looked like they were sort of all around him, like demons or things to be dealt with or pressing on him. Now she's completely protected. She knows how to master herself. They're still there. She's aware of them. And we also see the same eye up there that sent the flames into the tower is now sending light to her and into this snake. So, when you come to the world card, you're evaluating this whole long chapter that you've been through, and you're putting closure on things, and you'll start to begin the hero's journey again. There'll be a new calling to action, and there'll be new worlds you discover and new allies and adversaries and tests. But it's the completion of the cycle. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask or share? I know this is a lot of info, right?
I know, yeah, if you are not too familiar, it's a lot.
Is it? Okay.
But those two decks you have, is there a reason you use one or the other if you see people?
Yeah, well, I post the Rider-Waite because that's what most people are told to learn on. But as I said, it tends to have a very, it's a more Christian-based deck.
Okay.
And so the philosophy and the advice then, or the guidance from that deck is more sort of black or white or traditional, or that there's, power over us that we're negotiating. Whereas the cosmic deck and the Thoth deck are much more spiritual or metaphysical, and the power comes from us, which is a completely different way of looking at the world as well.
Yeah, but what makes you decide which deck to use for a particular person?
Oh, I see. Well, I don't really use the Rider-Waite in my practice because I relate more to the cosmic kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I started on the Thoth deck that you saw, without knowing what it was or how powerful it was. I was just drawn to it, because without going into a whole class of it. People used to come for tarot classes, and I'd say, okay, lay out your deck, and we'll look at how different the art is. And as we got into discussions about each card, it was really quite amazing how the underlying philosophy of life was shown through the deck, and led to some really interesting discussions. And most of the time, the Thoth deck is talking about your own will. To manifest things through self-awareness, whereas the Rider-Waite is sort of feeling a little more fated, that you don't have a choice. Things will happen to you, or things are in other people's hands than yours. So of course I like the other one. There were oh no, there's tons of decks now. But the Rider-Waite is the classic one. So is the Marseille, is a very old deck. And I forget the name of we don't really use it now, but the first tarot deck goes back to the Renaissance. I think it's an Italian deck. But now there's so many, you can't keep up with them all. There's hundreds that are designed. But I teach with these two because they're so different in their philosophy, and most things are based on either of the two of them. They're spin-offs, yeah. Go ahead.
What do you do the difference of this tarot deck and you go there with the oracle deck?
Mm-hmm.
Can you do the same with both of them? Or?
The oracle decks tend not to be like talking about the archetypes. Like their oracle deck, I could call it whatever I want. I could call it, I don't know. Do you have one? I'm blanking out on what oracle decks.
Well, I have some with the angels.
Oh yeah, the angel decks. Yeah. You're just sort of accessing a very different energy with that. I mean, the angel decks are positive for sure to use, and they'll bring more light in your life. The tarot, the tarot shows the good, the bad, the ugly, the dark, it shows everything. Yeah. And oracle decks tend to stay more with just positive. Yeah. Does anyone else, anything did I go too fast? Anything confusing? Anyone want to?
It is confusing.
Yeah, I know.
Know about that. It is confusing.
Yeah. It's the first time I give this too. I mean, so I didn't mean to overwhelm everybody. But,
So I guess with the hero's journey, we're always somewhere on the journey. It's like
Yes.
an unending cycle.
yes,
We're always going on somewhere.
yes,
Some of that.
exactly. Well, let's just start with that. Did anybody recognize yourself in any of the cards or any of the stages of the journey? Yeah?
Events. I recognize events. Like, I think we've all had tower moments. We tend to be mooning sometimes.
Yes.
We go through this. And I always personally believe the bad leads to the good, So bad events, let it go,
Yeah,
move on,
clears the way.
it'll get better. It can't get worse.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
Do you recognize yourself where you might be on this wheel at this time in your life?
Well, I'm definitely starting a new journey.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're hearing the call to action for something? That's great. Anyone else? Yeah?
Yeah, the thing is, we are assuming that there's only one call to action. So there's only one hero journey and you're doing things one by one. Not one call by call, let's say.
Yeah, it's a good
That-
point.
I don't know, my life is not like this.
Yes.
I mean, in my life I have several call to action.
Yes.
At the same time,
Yes.
I need to decide which one I can do. And if
Yes.
they all are together, it's not a problem because one step is going, they're going to be in different steps on that pathway.
Yes.
But many times, at least for me, it has happened that I've been in a situation that one call to action is in contradiction to another call to action.
Yeah.
Some of them, they are almost duties, they shouldn't be, but they are duties that you impose to yourself or they are coming from outside.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find more difficult to manage is precisely that. How you can attend everything if you really need to attend them. You're not supposed to do that, but how do you deal with them?
Well, I think one sort of overarching one will tend to emerge if we go deeper in ourselves. I know what you're talking about though. Most people have multiple dreams and multiple goals and multiple calls. But like, let's take an extreme, like where somebody's just totally scattered. It's like, well, I think I want to go back to school, but like I'm going to travel first, but I might want to get married. I think I want to have a baby, but maybe we should move it. I don't know. Maybe I should get a new job. And they're all over the place, right? Like that's not really a call to action. That's just scattered, right? So, but if you have like, I feel compelled to write a book, but I also feel compelled to like, travel the world. Well, they could coincide, but they could also feel like they're very separate. So I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to narrow in on, like what kind of things.
No, it was more that if you go to the beginning of the speech, that it was the archetypes and how do you fit into that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the archetypes, for instance, the mother could be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you are in that. But at the same time, you are a professional. But at
Yes.
the same time, you are married, so you are a wife.
Yes.
So there's a lot of them,
Yes.
and you have them to match them up. If they are in the family environment to say something,
Yes.
that could be a kind of easy. But sometimes they really are trying to
Yeah.
position you in different ways.
Yeah.
So time ago, for instance, I was in a situation that I needed to choose my family, not my family, but yeah, it was a choice. And it was a call, so I had the call to really take my career and, bust it completely,
Mm-hmm.
or take care of my family. So,
Yes.
and it was not a dilemma, it was never a dilemma because I love my family.
Yeah.
But I never arrived to the point to know if I really was loving my family so much. Okay, this sounds very strange.
No, I
Or if
understand.
I really, it was a duty, it was raised in a way that the only thing that is important in your life is your family. So was I really free that time to really think I'm going to have a lot of more kids instead of
Yeah.
boosting my career?
Yeah.
So sometimes those archetypes, if you identify with different of them, you are in a tough situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not only to know.
But the
wow,
call to
I wake
action-
up today and today I want to be a teacher, and then I wake up tomorrow, so I'm confused. It's not that I don't know what I want to do with my life. It's that eventually sometimes you need to. You were in very advanced stage in one of the things, and then maybe that's the tower. It comes to you saying, "Hey, you are pregnant. Okay, it's pretty cool. So forget about riding cars, So
Yes. Yeah, sometimes life decides it for us, despite all the multiple things we're trying to juggle. But like the call to action, let's say in that case, I don't know, I'm not saying for you personally, but like, because that's a classic one, right? Career or motherhood type of stuff. I mean, I think there's women that the call to action is, I want to have a baby, and that just takes over everything. Like that's stronger, and they will make sacrifices or choices around that. Whereas if you're called to action, even if you're a family person, if it's to have a career or to have your freedom or to have something else that's in conflict with it, I do believe that there's a point where those things become so strong that you will be compelled to go in that. Because otherwise you stay, like you said, trying to do all of it at once. We get stuck there, and then yeah, something like the Tower could come along and decide it for you. I see that all the time, especially with women. They come in and they don't know whether they should have a baby or pursue their career, and then life tends to decide it for them, and usually they end up having a baby 9 times out of 10. And the pregnancy then gives them their mission. Like, life's suddenly clear. It decided it for me. I'm a mom. You know, but then the call to action may come up again if they had this desire to express their passion or they've got ambition. It'll come back. Like, I really believe that, you know, there's certain things in all of us that never quite die. They keep calling to us. They keep going. You know, they come and go, but they don't go away until we express them or do something about it. That's more what I would say is a call to action. Those things that don't quite go away. That itch, you know. Anyone else have anything finally or questions? No? Well, thank you for coming and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Catherine, I'm sure we have some more topics to cover some other time.
Mm-hmm.
But you managed to get through a lot in that period of
I
time.
squashed
My
it in
gosh.
there. I did, yeah.
You all have to go home and digest it now, right?
Oh, good. Thanks. You take care.